Hello, I'm John with the Christian Century, and I'm joined today by one of my favorite writers for the Century, Debie Thomas. Debie recently wrote an article for the magazine about reimagining our theology of heaven. So we're going to chat about that article today. We're going to chat about heaven a little bit. But first, Debie, why don't you tell us a little bit more about who you are?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So I am a columnist for the Christian Century. I write for the Faith Matters column. I live in California in the Bay Area with my husband and our two children. And in addition to the Century, I serve as a minister of formation at St. Mark's Episcopal Church in Palo Alto, where I help people with figuring out how to go deeper in their faith and how to think about their faith in the context of our complicated contemporary life.
Yeah, thanks. Well, and breaking news for anyone who doesn't know, we're redesigning our magazine right now, and the Faith Matters section is now called Voices. So you can, if you have the physical magazine, you can look in the Voices section to find Debie's articles. Okay, so Debie, this article, I loved it. I thought it was fascinating. You
Yeah.
say in the beginning of the piece that for good reason, people have moved away from focusing a lot on heaven, and you talk about in your own story how you were introduced to this pie in the sky theology. And I wonder if you could just tell us a little more. What do you mean by that? What kind of theology are you talking about?
Sure. So I was raised in a very tight-knit evangelical Christian community in Boston. And there was much about that tradition that I really loved and learned from. But as far as heaven was concerned, it was a we don't have to worry too much about life here. You know, once you've accepted Jesus, once you've professed faith in God and in what Jesus did for you on the cross, you're good. You're pretty good. You can kind of settle in and enjoy life here. And you don't have to worry too much about the brokenness that you see around you. You don't ultimately have a responsibility there because at some point Jesus is going to come down from the clouds and just fix everything, and we're going to go to our real home where everything is going to be perfect. And so there was a kind of apathy that came along with that, a sense of we don't really need to engage too much with um, the issues that we see on Earth because they will ultimately just be taken care of.
Mm, yeah. Well, so with the downside of that theology being pretty evident, the apathy that you're talking about,
Yeah.
why do you think it's so prevalent? Because I mean, I was taught very similar theology in my younger days. So why do you think this kind of vision of heaven has become so popular?
Well, it's easy, isn't it? I mean, it's easier than having to actually think about, oh, wow, the world has a lot of pain and suffering in it, and maybe I have a real responsibility to God and to my fellow human beings to engage there. Um, it really lets us off the hook, and so I think there's the ease of it. There's also comfort, right? There's no question that for especially for people who find life really difficult on Earth for whatever reason, there's definitely comfort in thinking um, this is just kind of a big waiting room for what's actually coming. I just have to grit my teeth and get through this, and then everything is going to be okay. So I don't want to downplay that. That's a real comfort and a real balm for many people.
Yeah, thank you. So I think the heart of the article, or at least the big takeaway for me, you suggest that if we had a more robust or a new vision of heaven, it could make us more engaged rather than less engaged with the here and now of this world that we live in. And you just kind of tease it. You kind of leave it to the reader to do the reimagining. So I'm curious if you could just share a little bit about what you have in mind. What kind of new theological work might we have to do around heaven to have this kind of effect on us?
Sure. I mean, so when I think about heaven now, I think about things like justice and reconciliation, that what is broken here, systemically, deeply broken here on earth, is of infinite value and importance to God. So much so that the work of healing and the work of reconciling, the work of bringing justice is ongoing, but it's not going to end when our lives here on earth end. Um, And so, as far as that being a working theology for us, that means we don't get to just be apathetic because there's such a disconnect between God's dream and God's will and hope for what humanity can be and where we are now. And so I think if we have a robust picture of a holy, healed, and reconciled world, then everything in us, our impetus should be towards ushering that in, towards making that come alive in whatever way we can while we're here, knowing that God will complete the work that we engage in, knowing that it's not in vain. Um, I just feel like right now we're in a place of so much despair and hopelessness. You know, people really feel like we're up against things like climate change, which are so much bigger than us. So if we could simultaneously hold God's final vision, God's final dream, which will be realized, and then our role in bringing that in, making that in its small ways happen, I think we'll be in a much better place.
Mm, thank you. Well, I'm sure we could talk about this theme for a long, long time, but
Absolutely.
you're a columnist, so maybe we can chat more about future
Sure.
articles that you write. Thank you so much for being here and chatting today, Debbie. Um, Everyone, if you would like to read this article, if you haven't seen it yet, we will be posting the link to the article in the video description below. So please check that out. And yeah, thanks so much, Debbie. It was great to chat with you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.